When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comedy channel. In today's video, we're going to be continuing on our 100 best characters of Song of Ice and Fire. In today's video, we're going to have our first character that is not part of the main story, and is a character specifically from Fire and Blood. Now, this is where I think the list is going to get a bit, like, divisive, I guess. I think some people have already kind of had their gripes, but to me, it's hard to gauge all 100 characters, and to gauge the 100 best characters, especially lower down. I think like the bottom 50 are much more debatable. I think you could really give me a good debate as to why this character should be lower or higher. But the character is Aemon Targaryen. Now, not the Aemon from the normal story. This is the son of Jaehaerys, his first son. And the little bit of this is going to be, I really like the Targaryen history. I like a lot of the characters, as well as this character is a very significant character. This character really opens up the door, I think, and kicks it open wide open into what do we do in terms of succession, right? Is it the man or the woman that comes next? And that's going to really go into his like children and grandchildren as well. For the people that don't know, Aemon's line is basically Rhaenys. So the Rhaenys from House the Dragon, that is like her father, right? So that's that line from Jaehaerys. That's how Rhaenys has her claim to power. So when we go through this, I predominantly think the reason this character is higher than the characters we've already talked about is their significance to the story. I think they are a very dynamic character that leads to a lot of interesting conflicts that are going to happen because of what ends up happening to this character and all of that. And I think there's some nice tidbits of information that's really cool to this character. The thing that brings this character down is, whereas a character like Bronn, we know what their character is like, right? We have conversations, firsthand POVs with someone talking to them. We don't have that with this. We're trying to basically judge who this character is through the histories. And that's the difficult part about judging characters from Fire and Blood, because we don't know exactly who they are as characters. And so a little bit of the reason I like some of these characters is that we can speculate about them. So that's kind of the introduction into Aemon and why I wanted to put him on here. Originally, I didn't have him on here, but I thought, reevaluating the bottom of my list, I wanted to put this character in here. So that'll get us into the video. But before we go further into his life and talk about the character, I wanted to give a massive thank you to the Patreons and members that support the channel. If you did want to become one, you get videos early. I'm going to be doing some exclusive content throughout the summer. So yeah, if you wanted to do that, consider that. And let's get into the video. So Aemon Targaryen has quite a unique look. He is described as having eyes as pale as lilac. His hair was a rare color, rare even in old Valyria. It was pale and shone like white gold. Again, that's very different. A lot of the Targaryens do have that normal silvery hair, but that's not the way that we see Aemon is described. It's shown like white gold, very unique description of the character of Aemon Targaryen. But he definitely looks the part of being a Targaryen, of being the heir to the throne. He was born in the year 55 AC. At this time, Jaehaerys was already on the throne. The time of Maegor the Cruel was over, and Jaehaerys and Alysanne were closer to the beginning of their rule. So Aemon grows up in a very peaceful time period. That isn't to say he's not going to encounter times of short wars or be involved in things that eventually lead to his death, but he grows up in a time of relative peace and stability within Westeros. And something that we're going to see right from the get-go about the character of Aemon is, remember, Aemon is not the firstborn child of the two. He's actually the second-born, as the elder at this time was Princess Daenerys. Now, Princess Daenerys would not live that long, but for the time being, she was the eldest child of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, and this would cause a rift between the two, as Jaehaerys believed more on the idea that the male heir should come first. And I think Jaehaerys probably believed this. We'll talk about this a lot more when we get to the character of Jaehaerys in this series. That was more traditionally accepted in Westeros, and I think he had the foresight to realize if he did name a woman to the throne, that could cause issues. How would the succession go? Basically what we end up seeing with Rhaenyra in the House of the Dragon, the Dance of the Dragons time period. And so for now, the way Jaehaerys would try to please Alysanne and just end the argument is the original plan was Aemon was going to marry his older sister Daenerys. Now, in theory, that's a great idea, right? You just unite their claims and basically don't have a rift there. And you basically continue what the Targaryens have been doing, marrying siblings to siblings and all of that. So that makes perfect sense. But that doesn't really go as planned, as we'll talk about. But another thing we need to realize here is that also was continued from Princess Rhaena to put a dragon egg in Aemon's cradle, and this was done as well. And Aemon was a very popular baby. You have to remember Jaehaerys was really coming into his popularity. He had ended the threat of Maegor the Cruel. He had united the faith with the kingdoms and the Targaryens. The popularity of the Targaryens was probably around its highest during Aemon's birth. And for you guys that have seen Lion King, we kind of have a very similar moment here, where many people were thrilled to be able to see the new prince as he was already being considered the heir, and Jaehaerys climbed the ramparts of the main gates of the castle and raised Aemon over his head so all could see. It was said that in response, a roar went up so loud that it could be heard across the narrow sea. That really paints the picture of Aemon in his life. He would be someone that would be very well loved. His death would be very tragic to Westeros as a whole. It reminds me quite a lot of Baelor Breakspear. He was the heir to the throne. He was someone that people had faith could come after, a great king, and it was Jaehaerys. In Baelor's case, it was Daeron. It was a time in which many were looking forward to the future. It seemed like the Targaryen dynasty was being cemented. But only 2 years later, another very important figure would be born. Prince Baelon would be born in 57 AC. For those that don't know, Prince Baelon would be the father of Viserys and Daemon Targaryen in the normal story of House of the Dragon, so very significant. But we know from a very young age, the two brothers were very close. As soon as Baelon could walk, he would follow Aemon everywhere. The two were very close companions. And it kind of gives you what I think the idea of what Viserys and Daemon wanted to be. Right? They wanted to be very close. And we know that Daemon had a love for his brother and Viserys probably had that as well, especially given the TV show, the way they paint that relationship. You can kind of see some similarities here in what possibly we would have saw from Viserys and Daemon from a young age. Very similar to how, again, their father Baelon would have acted with Aemon as well. And so from an early age, we see the dynamic between the two brothers that would really be a big part of kind of Aemon's death as well. We also know when he was about 3 or 4 years old in 58 AC, Aemon attends a tourney at King's Landing on the anniversary of Jaehaerys' coronation. Nothing really that important happens, but it is something I wanted to point out because it is something that happened during his life, but he shared the royal box with his parents, his sister Daenerys, and his brother Baelon. Again, I think it's important if you're Jaehaerys to understand that Aemon is someone that needs to be seen by the public quite a lot. Aemon is going to be the character that is going to need to win over the people. So in a similar route that Rhaegar was a character that was trying to get his name kind of seen by a lot of the lords and being someone that they can turn to when Aerys goes mad, and when Rhaegar is kind of calling this tourney at Harrenhal, trying to get all these lords to kind of oppose his father and to get him on the throne. That's something that Jaehaerys would have wanted. He would have wanted people to really respect and like Aemon. And Aemon, it definitely helps, but Aemon in his own right was someone that was very easy to like. He was someone that impressed very easily. But in 62 AC, King Jaehaerys formally grants the 7-year-old Aemon the title of Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Can you think about the pressure that's already put on Aemon at 7 years old? He's already being declared this. It's not something where it was just kind of like, yeah, we kind of all know this, but no, at 7, Aemon becomes the heir to the throne. And we already see his mother, Queen Alysanne, trying to find a suitable marriage partner for him as he is the heir. This is one of the most vital points of the Targaryen dynasty. You want to make a good marriage pact with the future heir to the throne. Very similar to the way Rhaenyra needed to have a good marriage, we also see that Aemon needs to have a good marriage. And so Alysanne goes to work putting Aemon next to Jocelyn Baratheon. And this seemed to bear quite a lot of fruit. The two children spent the entire evening talking and laughing together. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, at the beginning of the video, didn't you say that Aemon was supposed to marry Daenerys? That was the original plan? Well, that doesn't seem to go well. Only 5 years after Aemon's death in the year 60 AC, Daenerys ended up dying. So you're kind of forced with a difficult situation now, because Aemon is your oldest child. You have him maybe go down to another daughter and being Alyssa. Alyssa would have been, again, the next oldest daughter that he would have had. But this didn't seem like a good idea, given that Alyssa was much more interested in Balon, Aemon's brother. So it would seem kind of weird. And again, you would have thought already that Balon and Alyssa would have been marrying, given what we would have seen with Daenerys and Aemon, how they would have been kind of pushed together from an early age. So with all of this kind of being considered, it makes a lot of sense. Now, the Baratheons, this is an interesting move, because we see like the two really get on and it seems like a good relationship. And I think another thing as to why this would have been important at this time, and we do see this as just another thing to kind of tie the Baratheons to the Targaryens. Again, we do know, right, that the Baratheons were pretty close to the throne at this time, but there had been some separation of power. During Jaehaerys' kind of come up when he was not old enough to take the throne, there had been some stuff in terms of the Lord Baratheon, Rhaegar, who had been the Hand of the King and kind of the de facto leader at the time, kind of had a falling out, and, you know, Jaehaerys fixes that problem, but this would have just been another layer, right? Just another layer to make sure that that alliance is tight together. And so from a lot of reasons, this is a good alliance, in my opinion, and it makes a lot of sense as to why Alysanne would have put the two together. But in 68 AC, at the age of only 13, I believe, 13 or 14, Aemon's betrothal to Lady Jocelyn was announced. They were married 2 years later in a ceremony as grand as the Golden Wedding. So yeah, really a spectacular event, and it really needs to be a spectacular event. Aemon is the heir to the throne. Him being married is a big event. You want everyone to see it. You want everyone to see, you know, Aemon and his wife and their splendors. They are going to be the future rulers of the realm. It's very important to establish that. If we look at what Aegon was doing with Aenys, it was very important to establish Aenys and Alyssa during that time as being the future rulers, so people knew them, right? And you could either start making relationships with these lords, hearing their gripes, things that they are, you know, worried about. This was a very important time for Aemon in his life. He is someone that's learning to fight, and he still has to learn how to rule. He has to be someone that can do all of these things while also now having a wife at only the age of 15 or 16. He's someone that has to grow up very quickly, and I think that's really important to understand for Aemon. But in 72 AC, only 2 years after their wedding, Aemon was the victor in the Squires melee during the tourney at Duskendale in honor of Lord Darkland's wedding. And this is the time where he becomes a knight. And so we do see that Aemon is not someone that's knighted like extremely early. Like, we've seen other people that they are given swords, they are given the title of being a knight way too early. If you think about Maegor is given a Valyrian sword by his mother and knighted very early on. At this time, you know, it's still very early, but Aemon gets knighted, I think, around the age of 17 or 18, which makes a lot of sense, right? He's coming into his actual manhood. He's actually experienced a lot at this time. He's still a young man, but still. But we also see that not only does he become a knight, but he also claims the dragon Caraxes, the fiercest of the young dragons present in the dragon pit. So for you guys, again, that don't know, Caraxes is the dragon that Daemon ends up taking as well. So it is interesting when you think about the dragon he takes, right? He takes Aemon's dragon. So just something else to kind of note there into what Aemon was doing around this time. And I think if you're Aemon, you're taking something for yourself, right? You're not taking a dragon that's been ridden by someone else or anything like that. It's establishing, again, you are going to have a new rule after your father dies, and you are going to be your own person, right? It's making your own legacy. And I think that would have been another decision as to why he would have taken Caraxes. Now, you might be thinking as well, so Aemon gets married in 70 AC, and there's no children until 74 AC. Now, I want to point this out because when you go to the wiki of the character of Jocelyn Baratheon, and I don't remember anything in Fire and Blood talking about this, but it's quite weird that the two only have one child. And we're not told that it was anything in terms of either one of them having reproductive issues, but it leaves this weird situation in which your firstborn, Aemon Targaryen, doesn't have more than one kid. In a time where it was really important to have a lot of kids. Think about how many kids that Jaehaerys and Alicent have. They have quite a lot of kids. And so, can we read into that? Was Jocelyn maybe unable to have another child after Rhaenys? And you might be thinking, well, Aemon dies fairly young, but he dies almost 22 years after their marriage. So they had plenty of time to make another child, but they didn't. And again, there's just something we have to read into, right? Was it Jocelyn just couldn't have any more kids, and that was maybe a fear of her dying? It could show how good of a man Aemon was, that he put the needs of his wife over the needs of having more heirs, something that people in the future would not be able to do, notably someone like Viserys Targaryen. And so all of that is very interesting to think about during this time, because it also has rippling effects as to what we'll see in the future. Instead of Aemon's line being on the throne, it will go to his brother Balon's line, because it was a boy. Balon ends up having boys, whereas Aemon does not. Aemon has only a daughter. But a lot of the way we can see of Aemon, the way he goes about how he carries himself, the way he's this distinguished knight, someone that all the people love, it's something that Rhaenys is going to take as well. It's something that she tries to emulate off of her father. But in 74 AC, Aemon becomes a father when Jocelyn gave birth to their daughter, Princess Rhaenys. And we have a bit of a time skip here. So after Rhaenys is born, we also know that on his 26th birthday, Aemon was appointed to the office of Lord Justiciary, was appointed to office, and was made Master of Laws. Again, so Aemon's being put in a position where he can learn, where he can understand what are the laws of the realm, a position in which he can learn and eventually elevate his position and become the true ruler. But think about how Jaehaerys does this. Jaehaerys doesn't throw this on Aemon right away. He lets Aemon grow and continuously get better. He doesn't throw it all at him at the same time. It's a lot about, I think, the way Jaehaerys worries, the way Jaehaerys handles the succession, because he understands you shouldn't throw everything at somebody. That's a bad way of doing things. But in 83 AC, Aemon, along with his brother Balon and their father Jaehaerys, they also end the attempted invasion of the Stormlands by Prince Morian Martell of Dorne. Again, they take their dragons, they destroy the Dornish fleet before it could even make landfall. The war was fought and won in a day, and upon their return to King's Landing, Aemon, Jaehaerys, and Balon received a riotous welcome as they had won a war without losing a single man. Now, this is again important just to show that Aemon can be a war veteran. He can be somebody that can lead people into war, even though really it wasn't men, it was really just his dragon. And so it's a lot here to again just be giving Aemon ways to prove how you deal with things. How do you deal with rebels? You don't just let them just run all over you like Aenys did. Jaehaerys was someone that was fair. He was someone that, yes, would try to show the benefits of keeping the peace, but he would also show you the flip side. If you did break his peace, he would show you the dragons. He would put down those rebellions. And so that's all stuff that's very important to show not only Aemon, but also his brother Balon. But at this time, we're also seeing Aemon taking royal progress is very similar to the way Aegon set up. You know, going around the kingdom, seeing what people want you to do. And we see Aemon as this character that is being built up more and more to where he is the person that's going to rule later. As his father is getting older and older, more responsibility is getting put on Aemon. And I'm someone that is of the belief that if Aemon had survived a little bit longer, I think Jaehaerys would have made Aemon the king and would have resigned. The way we talk about that Viserys should have resigned and put Rhaenyra on the throne while he was living, that's what I think Jaehaerys had set up for Aemon. I think as Jaehaerys got older, he would have realized that he was not fit to do this anymore and that it was time to give up the throne to Aemon. I think that's something that he would have really considered. And so when you think about all these progresses, especially in the Westerlands, it's about building those connections. It's about giving Aemon some sort of setup so that when he takes the throne, it should be a very successful transition of power. Because think about it at this time, what Jaehaerys is thinking about in terms of what Aemon's going to go through. When Aegon gave the throne, when Aegon died and it passed to Aenys, rebellion everywhere. When Aenys died, you still had those rebellions, but now you also had Maegor coming over usurping the throne. Now, maybe Maegor was right to do that, but still. If you then go from Maegor to Jaehaerys, and Jaehaerys, yes, he had the easiest of all of them, but he still had things he had to deal with. He had to deal with the faith. Again, they had been weakened, but how do you bring them back together without continuing that war? How do you, again, deal with some of the issues that he had to deal with when he came to taking the throne? How did he prove himself to the people? All of those things is what Aemon is doing right now. This is basically him coming into his throne before Jaehaerys gives it up. And that's very important for Aemon and Jaehaerys to set up going forward. But 4 years after the kind of a lot of these royal progresses really start getting going, in 92 AC, which would be a year that would go down in history for Westeros and to the really big detriment of House Targaryen, Aemon would lead the assault on the Myrish pirates who had conquered the eastern half of Tarth. Again, Tarth being from where Brienne comes from. During the struggle known as the Myrish Bloodbath, Aemon left for Tarth on the 9th day of the 3rd month of 92 AC. And shortly after learning that his daughter Rhaenys was pregnant with her first child, Aemon arrived before the fleet of his son by marriage, Lord Corlys Velaryon. Now, this is something else that would have been interesting. We also know that, again, Aemon would not have really been... Now, again, we really don't know to what extent Aemon and his wife Jocelyn thought about this marriage to Corlys Velaryon, as Rhaenys kind of took it up with Jaehaerys and not Aemon. But I do think Aemon would have had like some say in there. But again, it goes pretty well, you would think, and Corlys was a man that would be really good to tie to your family. Think about what was going on here. If you're Aemon and you're coming to the throne, you have the Baratheons backing you, you have the Velaryons backing you. You would have had the two most powerful families really at this time behind you. That would have been really key. Again, you can also argue the Hightowers as well, the Lannisters, you know, there's other powerful houses, but the Baratheons and the Velaryons are definitely high up there. The Velaryons are definitely probably the most powerful at this time, but again, just a really good alliances being made with this line at this time. It just doesn't all go well. But on Tarth, Aemon met with Lord Cameron Tarth in the mountains and located at the center of the island where the Lord of Tarth had made camp. A pair of Myrish scouts eventually discovered the camp and recognized Lord Cameron. One of them took a shot at Lord Cameron with his crossbow, and this shot would be to the detriment of the people of Westeros, to pretty much everyone, as the arrow would miss Lord Cameron, but instead would hit Prince Aemon as it was stuck in his throat, and he drowned in his own blood. And this is a huge problem. If you're Jaehaerys, you've been grooming Aemon for years. He is this person that has gotten quite a big reputation in terms of the people of Westeros. He is someone that seemed a very good knight. He was a dragon rider. He was the father of Rhaenys and that line that was to come that we'll see in the Dance with Dragons. And what does his death cause? It caused an issue with succession, and something we will see over and over and over again until the end of the dance. Who is to come next? If you're Jaehaerys, you have a big problem. Who is the heir to the throne? Is it Princess Rhaenys, the only child between the two Aemon and Jocelyn, his oldest child at the time until his death? Should it go to Laenor, the child of Rhaenys? Should it go to his second son, Balon, the father of Viserys and Daemon? And eventually it does settle on Balon, but think about that, right? You pass over Rhaenys for the first time, and it won't be the only time, but Aemon and his line gets passed over. And that is something that will live on in kind of his legacy. And I think one thing you have to question is, why didn't Aemon have more children? This could have been resolved if he had a child. If Aemon had a child that was a male, I think it's likely that Jaehaerys would have named that child the heir. But we will never know, because the two never had a boy. It was only Rhaenys. And again, we could argue that maybe Rhaenys should have been the heir, but that wasn't the way Jaehaerys did it. And Jaehaerys saw the problems of putting Rhaenys on the throne, because half the people would like it, half people wouldn't. What Jaehaerys wanted to do was to avoid a civil war. And in a lot of ways, I can see Jaehaerys' rationale even more, given the fact that Balon was also being groomed to rule. Again, remember, Balon was also with Aemon quite a lot. He would have been also getting these lessons from his father, Jaehaerys. He would have been a good man, and we're going to talk about Balon on this list as well. I think he's slightly more interesting than Aemon. We have more I think, to go off of with that character. But this moment would really set up the next 50 to 60 years, as we would see crisis after crisis after crisis in terms of the succession, in terms of a male or a female. And this all would be started by one crossbow bolt gone awry. But that is the video. So thank you guys for watching. I want you guys to let me know what you think about this placement of Aemon Targaryen. Again, I recognize he's a character that we don't know as much about him in terms of his personality, in terms of, you know, the little things he was doing. We know generally his story. We know what the history tells of the character. And so it's kind of hard to judge him. And I think a little bit of my Targaryen bias is kind of coming in with this one, and I recognize that. But I'd like to hear what your guys' thoughts are on Aemon Targaryen. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.